All right, buckle up, everyone, because today we're taking a deep dive into a world you interact with every single day, but probably haven't given much thought to: your mouth. We've got some fascinating lecture notes here, and let me tell you, they are way cooler than any boring old biology textbook.
Yeah, it's amazing what's going on in there. So much happening in such a small space.
But we're going way beyond just teeth and tongue. We're going to be talking about the structures, the functions, even how you taste that first sip of coffee in the morning, using these lecture notes as our roadmap. Ready to get started?
Absolutely. Let's jump right in.
Okay, so let's start with the anatomy. First stop on our tour, the vestibule. Now, before I saw these notes, I had no idea what a vestibule even was. Have you ever heard of the vestibule?
Well, it's not exactly everyday conversation, is it? You can think of it as like the entryway to your mouth, the space between your cheeks and lips on the one side and your teeth and gums on the other.
Oh, so that's the vestibule, that little space where food gets stuck sometimes. So annoying. I knew the place, I just didn't know the name.
Yeah, exactly. And besides occasionally trapping those stray bits of food, the vestibule plays a key role in directing food toward your teeth, ready for chewing.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've seen the entryway. Now let's head into the main attraction, the oral cavity proper.
Think of the oral cavity as the stage where all the action happens. Your palate, that's the sealing hard palate at the front, soft palate towards the back. And of course, center stage, you've got the tongue as the floor.
You mentioned the soft pellet. Aside from being part of the ceiling, what does it actually do? I vaguely remember learning something about it in a singing class years ago.
Oh, it's super important for both speaking and swallowing. When you speak, the soft palate directs airflow through your nose or your mouth so you can make different sounds. And when you swallow, it lifts up to close off those nasal passages, stops food from going up your nose.
Wow, I never realized the soft palate was doing so much back there. Multi-talented, you could say.
It really is. Oh, and one more thing. This whole cavity, from vestibule to the soft palate, it's lined with a mucous membrane, keeps everything moist and lubricated and, for all that action going on.
Right, got to keep things running smoothly. Now, within this oral cavity, we've got a few more key players we got to meet. Let's start with the most obvious one, I guess. The lips.
The lips. We often think about them for talking and expressing emotions, but they're also essential for getting food into your mouth in the first place. They create that seal you need for proper chewing and swallowing.
It's funny how we take those basic things for granted. Okay, what about that little thing that connects our lips to our gums? The labial frenum. I'll be honest, I had to look that one up.
That's that little fold of tissue. You can feel it if you run your tongue along the inside of your upper lip. It helps stabilize your lips as they move.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's move further back, towards the back of the throat. There's that thing that always kind of makes me nervous at the doctor's office, that dangly thing in the back. What was it called?
You're talking about the palatine uvula. It actually stops food from going up your nose when you swallow. Important job.
So it's not just there to make me gag when the doctor's looking. Good to know. And nearby, we have the palatine tonsils, right?
Right. Those guys are part of your immune system, like little guards at the entrance to your throat, trapping and fighting off infections.
The tonsils, yeah, I definitely knew those. But it's amazing to think about all these structures working together back there.
It really is a remarkable system. And speaking of remarkable, we can't forget the star of the show, the tongue.
Oh, yeah, the tongue. I have a feeling it does a lot more than just help us taste our food. Am I right?
Absolutely. The tongue is like a multi-tool. Helps you form words, articulate sounds when you speak, moves food around during chewing, and then finally pushes it to the back of your throat for swallowing.
The MVP of the mouth. But hold on, how does the tongue actually paste things? It doesn't have, like, tiny noses all over it, right?
That's where taste buds come in. And this is where things get really interesting. Because taste buds aren't just scattered randomly all over your tongue.
Wait, really? I always thought they were just everywhere.
They're actually concentrated in specific areas, and different areas are more sensitive to certain tastes. So different parts of your tongue might react more strongly to different flavors.
Whoa. So that's why the tip of my tongue goes crazy for salty chips. Is that like a salty sensitive zone?
Bingo. And if you think about it from like an evolutionary perspective, it makes perfect sense. The tip of your tongue encounters food first, right? So being sensitive to salty and sweet might have helped our ancestors quickly figure out if something was nutritious.
That's so cool. I never thought about it like that. So where are all these different taste bud zones located? What else can we learn about their placement?
Well, let's take a look at our lecture notes. They tell us all about the geography of those taste buds. Let's start with acid. Okay, so our notes say acid taste. That's mostly detected along the anterior midline of the tongue, that's the center strip, towards the front.
Okay, so sour candies would hit that sweet spot. Haha, pun intended. What about the other tastes? Where do they hang out?
Well, sweet and salty tastes, they're mainly picked up along the anterior lateral sides, so the sides of your tongue, towards the front.
That makes so much sense. I always instinctively use the sides of my tongue to check if something needs more salt.
Exactly. And then if you go further back, to the back third of your tongue, that's the area that's most sensitive to bitter tastes.
Interesting. So bitter flavors hit us further back, almost like a warning signal, right? Like, hey, be careful with this one.
Yeah, there's actually a theory that sensitivity to bitterness at the back of the tongue, well, it might have evolved as a way to detect potentially harmful stuff before we swallow it.
Wow, this is making me think about food in a whole new way. Okay, before we get totally lost in the world of taste buds, we've got to talk about another essential element, saliva. What would our mouths be without it? Just a dry, sticky mess, I imagine.
You're absolutely right. Saliva is crucial for keeping things comfortable, for digestion, everything. And did you know there's not just one type of saliva? We've actually got 3 major salivary glands, each with its own special job.
Wait, 3? I only ever knew about the ones under my jaw. Are you telling me there are more?
Yeah, that's a common misconception. The ones under your jaw, those are called the submandibular glands, and they do produce a good chunk of your saliva. But then you've also got the parotid glands.
Parotid. Those ring a bell.
Those are the largest ones, located on each side of your face, just in front of your ears. Ever heard of the mumps? That's the gland that swells up.
Ah, that's where I've heard of them. Okay, so parotid by the ears, submandibular under the jaw. Where's the third set hiding?
The third set, those are called the sublingual glands. And as the name kind of gives away, they're located under the mucous membrane on the floor of your mouth.
Wow, 3 salivary gland powerhouses. It's like a symphony of saliva in there.
Aha, I like that. And each gland makes saliva that's a little different, tailored for specific tasks, like breaking down food, neutralizing acids, protecting your teeth.
This is incredible. So much going on that we never even think about. Okay, let's get back to those taste buds for a second. We talked about where they are, but how do they actually work? Like, what's going on at a microscopic level?
Okay, picture this. Microscopic, onion-shaped structures embedded in your tongue surface. Those are your taste buds.
Microscopic onions, not exactly the most appetizing image.
Maybe not, but it's accurate. Each taste bud, it's actually made up of 50 to 100 specialized taste receptor cells.
So these taste receptor cells, they're the real heroes of the story.
Exactly. They're the ones detecting the chemical compounds in your food and sending signals to your brain, which your brain then translates into those sensations: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami.
Wait, umami, what is that again? I feel like I've heard the word, but I can't quite remember what it means.
Umami, that's that savory, brothy, meaty taste. You know, like from mushrooms, tomatoes, aged cheese. It's considered the 5th basic taste.
Oh yeah, I've definitely tasted umami, just didn't know it had a name. So are there specific taste buds for each of these 5 tastes? Like a sweet taste bud, a salty taste bud, and so on?
That's where it gets a little more complicated. You see, for a long time, people thought that different areas of the tongue were exclusively responsible for specific tastes, like there was this taste bud map.
Right, like tip of the tongue only for sweet, sides for sour, and so on. I remember seeing those diagrams in school.
Yeah, well, those diagrams are a little too simplistic. While certain areas might be more sensitive to some tastes, all taste buds can actually detect all 5 basic tastes to some extent, regardless of where they are.
So it's not a strict division of labor, it's more like a gradient of sensitivity.
Precisely. It's much more nuanced than we once thought. Each taste bud has a mix of taste receptor cells, each tuned to a specific taste. And when a food molecule binds to its matching receptor, boom, it triggers a signal that goes straight to your brain through nerve fibers.
So it's like this whole communication network in our mouths, buzzing with every bite. But if all taste buds can detect all tastes, then why do some areas of the tongue seem more sensitive to certain things?
It probably has to do with the density and distribution of those different types of taste receptor cells. Like, the tip of your tongue might just have a higher concentration of receptors for sweet and salty, making it extra sensitive to those flavors.
Ah, that makes sense. So when I enjoy a piece of dark chocolate, it's not just about the sweetness hitting the tip of my tongue, it's about all those signals being sent from different taste buds across my whole tongue, each adding to the experience.
Exactly. It's a complex interplay of taste, texture, temperature, even smell, that all come together in your brain to create the perception of flavor.
This is fascinating. I had no idea. Something as simple as taste involves so much intricate biology and neurology.
And we haven't even talked about the role of saliva in all of this. Remember those 3 salivary glands we talked about? They're not just there to keep your mouth from drying out.
Oh, right. Saliva is also what dissolves those food molecules so they can interact with the taste buds in the first place, isn't it?
Exactly. Saliva is like a solvent, breaking down food particles, carrying them to the taste receptors. Without saliva, we wouldn't be able to taste much at all.
Saliva, the key that unlocks the treasure chest of flavor.
Haha, I like that. And on top of that, saliva also helps cleanse your mouth, washing away food debris, neutralizing acids that could damage your teeth. It's a busy little fluid.
It's like the unsung hero of the oral cavity,
Yeah.
doing all these important jobs we never think about. So just to recap, saliva helps break down food, it dissolves food so we can taste it, and it washes away debris. What else does it do?
Oh, it also lubricates the food, makes it easier to swallow, and even contains enzymes that kickstart the digestion process.
Wow, that's a lot of responsibility.
It is. And it's interesting to note that the composition of saliva can actually change, depending on things like what you eat, how hydrated you are, even your emotional state.
Really?
Yeah, well-
Emotional state. So stress can affect our saliva.
Yeah, when you're stressed, your salivary glands might produce less saliva, which is why you get that dry mouth feeling when you're anxious.
That makes a lot of sense. You know, speaking of stress, I'm suddenly feeling a little parched after all this talk about saliva. I think I need to grab a drink of water.
Good idea. Staying hydrated is super important for keeping that saliva flowing.
While I'm getting some water, can you give our listeners a little preview of what's coming up next?
Of course. When we come back, we'll be taking a step back, looking at the bigger picture. How does all this incredible machinery in our mouths work together, to allow us to eat, speak, and experience the world?
Sounds fascinating. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back, feeling much more hydrated and ready to jump back into the wonderful world of the mouth.
Excellent. So, as promised, let's zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture. We've explored all the individual parts of the oral cavity, but how do they actually work together to do those essential things we usually don't even think about?
Like eating and talking, right? They seem so effortless, but I'm sure there's a lot going on that we're not even aware of.
You're absolutely right. So let's start with eating. Imagine you're taking a bite of your favorite food. Your lips and cheeks guide the food in, and then your teeth, with help from those powerful jaw muscles, get to work, breaking it down into smaller pieces.
And while the teeth are busy chomping away, the tongue's in there, moving the food around, making sure it's all coated with saliva.
Exactly. Saliva, like we talked about before, softens the food, makes it easier to swallow, and even starts breaking it down with those enzymes.
Like a pre-game warm-up for the digestive system. But how does all that chewed-up food actually get from our mouths to our stomachs?
That's where swallowing comes in. And it's a surprisingly complex process involving a whole bunch of muscles in your mouth and throat, all working together.
I have to admit, I never really thought about the mechanics of swallowing before. It just kind of seems to happen automatically.
It does seem automatic, but there's a really precise sequence of events. So, as you get ready to swallow, your tongue pushes that bolus of food, that mass of chewed up stuff, toward the back of your throat.
So that bolus triggers a reflex, right? What happens next?
When the bolus hits the back of your throat, it sets off this reflex that closes off your airway. Super important, so food doesn't go down the wrong pipe.
That's why we can't breathe and swallow at the same time, right?
Yep.
Like a built-in safety mechanism to prevent choking.
Exactly. The soft palate lifts to block the nasal passages, and then the epiglottis, this little flap of cartilage, it covers the entrance to your windpipe.
It's amazing how our bodies just do all these things to protect us. Makes you appreciate the power of evolution, huh?
It really does.
Yeah.
Okay, so once the airway is safely closed off, the muscles in your pharynx, that's the part of your throat connecting your mouth to your esophagus, they contract to push the food down.
Like a wave of muscle contractions pushing the food along.
Perfect analogy. And from there, the food enters the esophagus, that muscular tube that leads to your stomach, where the real digestion party gets started.
It's incredible how smoothly all those muscles work together, like a perfectly choreographed dance in our throats every time we swallow.
And it's a dance we do so many times a day without even thinking about it. And speaking of well-choreographed movements, we can't forget about the mouth's role in speech.
Right. We were so focused on eating, we almost forgot about talking. And of course, the tongue is the star of the show when it comes to speech.
Oh, absolutely. The tongue is so agile, so dexterous, it can make this amazing range of movements, which is how we can make all the sounds of human language.
It's mind-blowing when you think about all the different positions and movements involved in making even a single word.
It really is. The tongue works with your lips, your teeth, your palate, even your vocal cords to create the airflow and vibrations we need to speak.
And don't forget the cheeks. They help shape the airflow too, right?
You got it. They create resonance, amplify certain sounds. It's like this complex orchestra, so many muscles working together in perfect harmony.
It really makes you appreciate the simple act of talking in a whole new way. And it's incredible to think that all this eating, swallowing, speaking is happening in this relatively small space inside our heads.
It really is. Speaks to the incredible efficiency and adaptability of human anatomy.
So, to wrap things up, what would you say is the most important thing we've learned today in our deep dive into the mouth?
I think the key takeaway is that the mouth is so much more than just the entrance to our digestive system. It's this complex and dynamic environment, full of amazing structures and functions that are essential for how we survive, how we communicate, how we experience the world.
Well said. Next time I take a bite or start a conversation, I'll definitely be thinking about all the incredible things happening in my mouth. I hope our listeners will too.
I hope so too. And here's one last thought for everyone to ponder. Knowing what we know now about taste buds, how could we use that knowledge to create healthier and more satisfying eating experiences?
That's a great question. I encourage everyone to explore that idea and see what insights you could uncover. Thanks for joining us on this fascinating journey into the world of the mouth.